Hello and welcome back. We are now starting the final session here that is about how to best foster collaboration between different agents to create this overreaching interdisciplinary situation that will give us the best evaluation and forward of the innovation for the future. Our next speaker had to leave his cozy bed very early to join us exactly now. That is a clue that he's way out west, or as we call it, the other West Coast. And we are really happy that he made the sacrifice, and we hope that he has a large cup of strong coffee in front of him. For over 35 years, he has served a role as a surgeon, innovator, teacher, but also leader. He is a co-director of the Stanford Bayer Center for Biodesign, has been that for over almost 20 years. That program is designed to foster collaboration and create a novel engineer from using a set of doctors, engineers, and business professionals in order in that interdisciplinary environment and use frontline research. So I had the opportunity to take a first-hand experience of that a couple of years ago in Stanford, and I was blown away. And I mean, just the didactic power itself, it's really amazing. So, and more than 3.4 million patients had been treated by tools and technologies that has their origins from that kind of program, or from that program itself. And it's been mimicked and tried to be copied in many places throughout the world. He's also chair of the board of the director of Fogarty Innovation, a non-profit organization that is an innovation hub, an incubator, and he is president of the International Scientific Committee in University of Strasbourg in France, and he also serves at different places in a similar position. He has been in the board of directors for over 20 startups, successful startups in the medical device industry. Dr. Thomas Krummel, Emil Holman Professor and Chair Emeritus of the Department of Surgery, Stanford University School of Medicine. Do you have your coffee ready?
Ready to go for you. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. And the next question is that we all know that to predict you make predictions really hard, especially about the future, but you have a solution to present to us. So please tell us all about that.
Good. Well, thank you, Dr. Lund. It's a privilege to be with you all today. Toby highlighted a few of the successes. What he didn't mention were the many failures, which are very much a part of how all these things work. And I think that's so important for the young people in the audience to understand. Again, it's a privilege to join you, and I look forward not just to this, but hopefully to visiting in person soon. Let's see, we're not advancing here. There we go. As Dr. Lund mentioned, I've had the opportunity to be at the tip of the spear, if you will, in a variety of early stage medical technology companies in a variety of roles. I would emphasize that medical technology innovation is very much like surgery, a full contact sport. You need to be actively involved, or it's really impossible to teach it because the world changes rapidly. I'd emphasize that amongst all of these, none of them are relevant to this presentation. I promise not to try to sell you anything. So I have three simple objectives in the next 30 minutes. One is to recount the early days at Stanford Xerox PARC and the development of Silicon Valley and the notion of, quote, inventing the future. Then to provide some real world examples of inventing the future from Stanford Biodesign and the Fogarty Institute. And then circle back towards where I think the world is going, pertinent to a wonderful engineering school like Chalmers relative to computer science and the looming role of data and AI in medtech innovation. So early days at Stanford, Xerox PARC and their influence on Silicon Valley and their influence on me. So this is lightning striking over Silicon Valley, and it turns out lightning strikes frequently. And over an 80-year period, companies like Hewlett-Packard, now HP, Sun Microsystems, Intel, Cisco, Apple, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, and many, many others have all had their roots in Silicon Valley. And if you think about the impact of these technology companies, our world has never been the same as a result of their existence and development. I think it's important as we talk in the university environment to acknowledge that many of the phenomenal discoveries and breakthroughs, not all, but many originated in university labs, and in particular in computer science, internet, agriculture, and biomedicine. Frequently, the technologies are driven by university laboratory discovery. I think it's axiomatic that the intellectual horsepower is indeed profound, and I emphasize it's not just the faculty, but it's the students and the postdocs, and that educational environment de-risks the process and de-risks it inexpensively, which is a real advantage, and can become and has become a critical engine to economic growth. All that said, tech transfer out of the university is essential. Universities are not designed to commercialize technology, but to discover and invent and innovate. And our past president, John Hennessy, used to talk about the porous walls of the university, which I think are a wonderful way to describe it. To give you some idea, this is a study commissioned by Sequoia Capital. And this is in 2011, so this is 10 years old. But Stanford University has clearly been one of the top tech transfer engines in the world, with more than 8,000 inventions and $1.3 billion in royalty. Technology like DNA cloning, fax cell sorting, sound synthesis chips, and that famous piece of intellectual property, the PageRank algorithm, have all been profound. More than 40,000 companies have been formed, 4 million jobs created, $2.7 trillion in annual revenue. And if you simply take what's come out of Stanford University, you have the world's 10th largest economy. All that said, there are also more than 30,000 not-for-profit companies, and the founders' philanthropy has been huge, and that's a non-trivial consequence for the university. There is more to Silicon Valley than Stanford, and importantly, the Xerox PARC, that's the Palo Alto Research Center, was there at the dawn of creation of early stage medtech or tech innovation. And it's chronicled in a wonderful book called Dealers of Lightning that I recommend to you. And it was arguably the greatest collection of computer science talented ever assembled, because it was singular in its location. To give you some idea of Xerox PARC's contribution, they conceptualized desktop computing, Ethernet networking, graphical user interfaces, scalable type, mouse, laser printer, all were invented at Xerox PARC. Everything we now call personal computer. And interestingly, when Apple sued Microsoft over Windows as an infringement, Microsoft's defense was Apple stole it from Xerox anyway. And the suit was dismissed. So a really profound contribution. I want to call your attention to Alan Kay. He joined Xerox PARC at the beginning, and in a paper published in 1972, so think about that, 1972, he conceptualized what he called the Dynabook. And what you see here in a copy of his paper is the Dynabook, which of course has a remarkable resemblance to a tablet computer. And most importantly, he even imagined that it would be so easy that children could use it. And of course, now only children know how to use it. Again, think about that. All that kind of concept developed, and the senior leadership at Xerox rebuffed him, said, were interested in following trends in the marketplace. And of course, there was no trend for tablet computing in 1972. And most importantly, and from whence the title of this talk emanates, he famously said, look, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. He went on to receive the Turing Award in 2003, the Nobel Prize in Computer Science, and Xerox never profited from any of these inventions. If you're interested in those stories, there's a second book that I highly recommend called Troublemakers. It chronicles a number of the technologies that developed, and Leslie Berlin is a brilliant author. I had an interesting opportunity in the spring of 2006 to speak with Andy Grove, the past CEO of Intel, trying to convince him to do the Fogarty Lecture. He asked me what brought me to Stanford, and I told him basically we had a failed department of surgery, but that I couldn't stand the thought of not A, trying to fix it, and B, come to Silicon Valley, because I said I'd rather fail than miss the opportunity. And he nodded and then said, what are the key factors for success in the Valley? And I said, intellectual capital, financial capital, a flat hierarchy, and a meritocracy. And he looked at me in the eyes and said, you missed one, risk capital, the same thing that brought you here. And the point is that while the Valley is complicated, expensive, crowded, the unique characteristic that has made the Valley work is this notion of the willingness to risk failure. And that, I think, is hard to create, and not everybody revels in that possibility of a significant risk. So does Silicon Valley have a secret sauce? No, but it does have a unique ecosystem of intellectual capital, venture capital, risk capital, and as a consequence has produced so much that we take for granted now. Finally, the notion of a very flat hierarchy and meritocracy, the very close working relationship between senior people and junior people, unfiltered, has, if you want to remake Silicon Valley, try to assemble these notions about how to interact. Simultaneously with the development of internet technology, I'll bring your attention on the medtech side to Dr. Tom Fogarty. Tom was not even a physician at the time. He was a scrub tech in the 1960s, and he witnessed the expert surgeons of the day make an incision from the groin to the knee. Think about that, an incision from the groin to the knee, then open the femoral artery to extract clot in patients that had embolic occlusion of their SFA, resulting in limb threaten. What he then noticed, very simple observation by a scrub tech, was most of those patients came back for an amputation. So while the surgeons of the day said this is a great operation and we're doing the best we can, he thought, well, if the best we can is an amputation, that stinks. So Tom, with a variety of insights, had a radical rethink of removing clot with a balloon catheter. And of course, the experts of the day vilified it. The paper was never published. His boss at the time said, this is a dangerous device and a procedure that borders on malpractice. Only one so uninformed as a medical student would dare to think of it. So when people ask me, why do we involve students in the process? That's exactly the point, that the uninformed doesn't know what can't be done. And of course, Tom Fogarty, in that very simple balloon catheter, revolutionized the notion of endoluminal therapy. And we had the unique opportunity in 2014 to witness Dr. Fogarty being awarded the National Medal of Technology and Innovation by President Obama at the White House. So 50 years later, an overnight sensation. Dr. Fogarty might be regarded as the godfather of medical technology development, and his thinking and his example has been profound for all of us. He's has more than 100 surgical instrument patents, more than 30 startups. We talked about his multiple awards, including the National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Tom would most importantly, in his sort of gruff way, say that translational medicine is not just a science fair project. It's a product in a box with a 1-800 number for sales and service. And most importantly, the development of a tool leverages treatment in a big way. And so it's no longer the patients that Tom treats, no longer patients that are treated at a given institution, but leveraged worldwide. To put that in cartoon fashion, a single physician taking care of one patient produces one unit of good, if you will. When we train other physicians, that becomes a multiplicative impact because the trainee goes out and does what we do. But most importantly, when you develop new solutions like Tom did, or like John and Mary Gibbons did with the heart-lung machine, or in the biochemistry lab, Willem Kalf from the Netherlands and the concept of dialysis, Albert Starr and the development of the first cardiac valve, or Jamie Thompson at University of Wisconsin, my alma mater, in terms of stem cells, the effect becomes geometric. And we thought if we could teach this, we could do a multiple of a geometric, and we thought that would be a good thing. So this is the ecosystem, and it is essential, and it's a very small area between San Francisco and San Jose. We have a couple of pretty good universities. We have one of the highest per capita a number of patents and PhDs. We have more than 300 venture firms, and 40% of the U.S. venture investment is all within a tight area. There is all of the beehive of activity around that, from legal to IP to animal labs, prototyping, and the like. And you see the internet and wireless companies and their locations in the South Bay. Then more than 1,400 life science companies are similarly clustered, and they're all clustered there for a reason, and that is that pre-COVID, you had to be there. I think what we've learned post-COVID is maybe you don't need to be there. Again, Tom Fogarty's Innovation Institute. So now I want to move on and get real and show you how this works. And it's not a theoretic, how do we think it works, but rather what has happened. So these will be real world examples of inventing the future, Stanford Biodesign. So 20 years ago when we began, we had the manifesto that we believe the process of innovation can be taught. And our goal was to create the next generation of medical device inventors and innovators. And this is the opening class. And we wanted to get real, pertinent to this famous Harris cartoon. And famously, in our university laboratories, we have our jargon and our thoughts and our discoveries. And we know that industry, when presented with a novel discovery, has the ability to make it, market it, and distribute it. But somewhere in the middle, a miracle has to occur. And as the one faculty member says to the other, I think we should be more explicit here in step 2. How do we make that miracle happen? And in many ways, it's not an easy on-off switch, but it is an environment, a way of thinking that hopefully increases the chances that a miracle occurs. And so fundamentally now, our manifesto as of 2020 is to focus on what, and we'll talk more about the notion of needs-based health tech. We've gone from med tech to health tech because that's the way the world is going, innovation, education, and educating and empowering the next generation of health tech innovators. A little bit of a not radically different from where we started 20 years ago. We're privileged to have a terrific bunch of people. Paul Yak, who you see in the upper right-hand corner here, is the founder and director, and was good enough to let me in the tent a couple of years later. We have a host of people across on a senior level. I'll call your attention to Oliver Alami, who was present at the first one of your engineering health tech summits. And we have a broad range of people from across the medical center and inside and outside the university. Fundamentally, that notion that John Hennessy mentioned of the, quote, porous walls. There is a dynamic way and a dynamic tension to think about how technology solves health needs. In one case, technology is the push, and that's, for example, if you have a laser, there are certain things that a laser can be applied to in terms of producing med tech innovation. The only problem with that is that becomes often the hammer looking for a nail. Another way to think about it is instead the need pull. What is the problem we need to solve? And then how do we go find the technology to do it? And in an era when technology push tends to dominate, we have tried to do what we like to call the need pull, and I'll try to be more explicit about that. We use what we tend to think of and comes out of the design school, a process of user-centered thinking, where you really observe the user, define the needs, think about how, prototype, and test. And that works great if you're trying to make an iPhone. But what if the user in healthcare is what we like to call an eight-headed monster? And by that, I mean we have doctors and patients, we have hospitals, we have regulatory bodies, we have payers, we have large medical practices and insurers, we have professional societies, government comes in, and then government comes in again, and it makes for a much more difficult environment to navigate in. What we like to think of as the advantage of a need pull can pay real dividends in terms of delivering value. And the fundamental notion is that we organize the way we think about what is the problem we want to solve. How do we get enough information to be sure that a technology is worth pursuing? Trying to be very explicit about what the have-to-haves are. But we do like to say that a well-characterized need is the DNA of a solution to the problem. And so our needs statement are always a very proscribed, a way to solve a specific problem in a well-characterized population to achieve a measurable outcome. And it is solution agnostic. It doesn't say it must be an operation, it must be a tool. It's simply a very objective way of trying to define success and then inventing around how do you produce success. And why does that make sense? To the physician, of course, any clinical need is worthy of attention and solution, but the reality is we can't solve every problem. And to an engineer, any cool, intriguing technology might be applied to a clinical problem. But as I said, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean you can pound any or everything. And here's the biggest reality that docs and engineers may not be aware of, is that if you're going to spend 7 to 10 years of your life and $40 million of other people's money to commercialize a technology, a front-end discipline process of a few months, while it seems like a long time, is time and money well spent. Oh, sorry, a little duplicate here. So to deal with that complexity, like any good academic, we create several pedagogic ways to think about how we identify the problem, how we invent a solution, and then how we implement it. And within a university, the identification is a clear area of strength. Invention is an area of relative strength, but implementation typically needs to move out of the university. And when we talk about the Fogarty Institute, you'll understand why. All these things have been pulled together in a variety of case studies. The textbook is a bestseller, and the companion website is pretty valuable. And it fundamentally is, as Dr. Lund indicated, is bringing together people who think differently. Physicians who may think like a gadgeteer, engineers who think about things in a mechanical way or an electrical way, and a business person who says, okay, how do we pull together people, discovery, risk tolerance, and venture funding to solve a problem? Over in our current construct, we have our primary audiences of fellow students, faculty, and universities from around the world. And we're privileged to have terrific people like Dr. Lund come spend time with us. On an annual basis, here, 2021, we have 200 students, more than 48 faculty and researchers, 16 global trainees, and 75 executives. And the stats are, as of April of 2020, 1,100 invention disclosures, as well as abstracts, chapters, books, 980 million almost $1 billion in real world funding, 51 startups, 18 other biodesign programs, 200 grads. But for the physicians like myself, the notion that 3.4 million patients have been treated is the ultimate accolade, if you will, or the ultimate measure of success. We know that ecosystem matters, and the outside world has much to add, and so biodesign in and of itself in the university is insufficient. So we lean on hundreds of people who are in the outside the university who generously donate their time. How does this work? This is an example of an actual process where I was operating on a child with a chest wall deformity. The anesthesiologist tried to place an epidural catheter and it didn't work over 45 minutes. We proceeded, and we see that all the time, and most of the time we do nothing about it. He witnessed the process and went from concept to prototype to clinical trial, raised the money, and made a simple observation having watched the failure of an epidural catheter. They thought about where's the epidural space, and they came up with the notion of what we call a 5,000-year-old machine called a screw, where instead of pushing or hammering a needle in, you can thread it in, and you can adjust the threads to make the passage easy or harder and adjust the distance per revolution. Not only that, but with a lamb chop and the dural canal visible here and a screw from Ace Hardware, they demonstrated the ability in a true to size fashion to be successful. The concept was refined, lots of prototyping, and 5 years later, clinical trials in the UK. There have been other student teams that have created the dirt cheap $20 Stanford Jaipur knee. Matt Callahan in the previous SARS pandemic came up with the notion of a very simple desktop ventilator with funding from Biodesign, the Gates Trust, and Burroughs Wellcome. And to give you some idea of how this can sweep across the world, working literally around the world to build and design the one breath ventilator. So by way of scorecard, we've talked about this, but I think most importantly for all of us is the 3.4 million patients treated. In the end, we're a university project, and this is a picture of our grads that come back every year, and the incoming ones look younger every year, and the alumni look older every year, and that's the way life goes. We do know that you can't do it quickly, and so the Fogarty Institute is a wonderful opportunity. Tom founded this as a not-for-profit more than 12 years ago, and it is very much synergistic with biodesign, and the key is that the goal and the output is commercialization, which is where patient benefit really happens, and a really serious what we call full contact mentoring by seasoned industry. We have a variety of companies in residence that span a variety of spaces. We have a number of partnerships with industry, and I'll focus on one as an example of how this can happen. So, because it's pertinent to us. So, Impress started to solve the problem of postpartum hemorrhage. We came to learn that there were more than 140,000 maternal deaths every year as a result of postpartum hemorrhage, and a ragtag team coming from Cal Poly, including Jesse Becker, who was a awardee of 30 under 30, top 30 innovators under 30 years of age. And they came up with the acknowledgement and the recognition that bleeding from the uterus after the baby is delivered is a profound problem. And the main cause is uterine atony. That is to say, it doesn't contract. Typically, we've tried to put balloons inside, but the problem is that keeps the uterus dilated. She came up with a clever notion of a simple seal in the vaginal canal and a suction device that creates uterine contraction, also allows us to make sure that there isn't blood pooling there. We did a 10-patient study in Jakarta, Indonesia, where postpartum hemorrhage is common, with a clinical success in 100% of our first 10 patients. over a period of 6 or 7 years. We've worked across the world. We built global awareness. Critically for us, we created a partnership with Merck in the early days, and the company literally 2 weeks ago was acquired by a Merck subsidiary for $240 million US. So I want to now go, where is the world going to? And I think it is legitimate to sort of observe that as medicine has evolved, we've moved from anatomy and pathology to physiology and molecular biology and genetics to now information technology. And I like to say we no longer have medicine, we have medical information. We move from the industrial age to the information age. And this takes advantage of Gordon Moore's observation in a paper titled Cramming More Components onto Integrated Circuits. At every 18 months to 2 years, computing power doubles. Exponential growth is profound. This is the Intel chip from 1971 to present. 3,500 times performance, 90,000 times more efficient, 60,000 times lower in cost. So if a Volkswagen Beetle that had equivalent progress, it would go 300,000 miles an hour, get 2 million miles per gallon, and cost 4 cents. Harnessing that is enormously powerful, and all of you, may be too young to remember that in 2007, this supercomputer first burst on the scene, and that has had profound impacts on the way we think and what we can do. I'll call your attention to 2 cover articles in The Economist, one of them which pointed out that by 2020, read a year ago, 80% of the adults in the world will have a supercomputer in their pocket, and that creates data, a more recent cover, the world's most valuable resource. So I think it's easy to imagine AI and its medical applications in terms of protocols, analytics, the famous article that AI is smarter than your radiologist. Actually, what the author meant to say is a radiologist with AI is smarter than a radiologist without. The IDX device was FDA approved in 2018 for diagnostic diabetic retinopathy, a diagnostic device. And we know that facial recognition is not just for Facebook anymore, but facial patterns and genetic syndromes, and a little app called Face2Gene. Image analytics are natural, and radiology will move to derm, to ophthalmology. We've already talked about in vivo microscopy and beyond. I want to bring your attention to, because I'm a surgeon, the notion of how data science might help us to improve training and measure surgical skills. This is a young aspiring engineer and one of our surgery residents. She happened to have just finished high school, was a AI nut, worked with Fei Li, one of the real gurus in AI, studied videos, looked at economy of motion tool exchange, received the top prize in neural information processing, and now are beginning to look at thousands of videos with Intermountain Health, and who knows where that goes from there, but it gives you an idea of where the field might be going. Augmented reality, Toby mentioned that I've been privileged to work with Jacques Marisco at the EarCAD Institute, and now augmented reality is a reality, taking a 3D virtual image pre-op, enhancing the existing image to identify tumor location. Digital assistants make good sense. We like to say Siri for doctors because the reality is our electronic health record has mainly turned physicians into data entry clerks. Finally, it's worthy of mentioning that robotics is burgeoning, and as Fred Moll, who's pictured here, likes to say, it's no longer just an operation, but the data set of the operation. And we can imagine robotics directing guidance or a no-fly zone and increasing autonomy where the device actually is the procedure. And I'll tell you that there are at least 18 robotic devices in use or in the pipeline. So by way of summary, I appreciate the privilege of participating in these sort of conferences. It becomes a real brain stretch for me. I've tried to provide you with a quick review of the dawn of Silicon Valley and the notion of inventing the future. We reviewed some real world examples of MedTech, Stanford Biodesign, Fogarty. We've talked, in a flash about the looming role of data and AI and health tech. And more than anything else, I think, the takeaway needs to be that mindset matters. I don't know that you'll hear this, so I'm going to speak over it.
You tend to get told
this is Steve Jobs speaking. You tend to get told that the world is the way it is, and your life is to live in the box. Have fun, have a nice family life. And then says, that's a very limited life. One simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you. You can change it. You can make your own things. You can. Once you learn that, you'll never be the same again. So it's my sincere hope that this little series of discussions is helpful to you all, and that notion of that kind of insight is valuable to all of you. So thank you again for the privilege of speaking, and I look forward to the rest of the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. This is Dr. Cromwell. This was great to hear, and we are just getting amazed how many different aspects we see here in the future in creation in front of our eyes. So I think you just to mention the collection here, or connection between Chalmers and what you mentioned with the Fogarty inventions and balloon dilatation. That maybe I told you before that Hans Wallsten used to go to school here in Chalmers. He graduated in 1950, and he's the one behind the wall stand that is still in use. So it's nice to see these connections all over the place. I have a question, and we got another question here. I take my own question first, just to be a bit clear about the finance situation here. You mentioned the venture capital and the risk capital. To me, they are a bit synonymous, but maybe you can clear out the difference there for us.
One is a mindset, and that is you're gonna live in a tiny apartment. You're gonna eat ramen noodles for 5 years because you're not going to be able to get paid very much, but you're going to solve the problem. There's no that risk tolerant part of venture funding, and they just happen to be in a position where instead of giving you money as a loan, they give you money as a part owner in the business. And good venture firms will not only become part owners in the business, but will be seasoned, experienced people that have an idea, prototype, and move it into a company that in the end is the only way that these concepts and these solutions get to patients in the hospital.
Yeah, thanks. It's a ramen noodle way of thinking. That's the mindset. Okay.
It's a mind. There's no question about it. Everybody wants to do that for clarity. Yeah. It's much easier to go get a job and get healthcare benefits and retirement contributions and make, like Job says, and have a nice life. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to change the world, then think.
Right. Well, it sounds a bit related to the old saying that, doing financial work, investing, that's the choice between eating well or sleeping well. Is part of that as well, I guess. So we got a question from one. Yeah, sorry, Tom. What did you think about that? Or no?
There is enormous energy waking and sleeping in all of these ventures, and it's easy and it's a success. Should give it a try, and I can tell you that I lose sleep over each of the startups that I've worked with.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. We got a question here from one of the listeners here. According to, for example, Lancet Commission, climate change will be the major driver for healthcare sector in coming decades. How does biodesign work with this kind of challenge?
So one of the most recent startups I'm working with looks at the problem of plastic waste in healthcare. So, within the last year, we've all seen the proliferation of PPE, personal protective, and every one of those things is a disposable piece, typically of, at best, and at worst, a lithium-based material that will last for 1,000 years. And so if you look at the overall role of healthcare as a polluting business, it is one of the top 5 most polluting businesses in terms of making trash. So a clever company had a notion that the waste from sugarcane bagasse can be fabricated into simple things, and of course is much more biodegradable. So, you know, in every problem we see the possibility of a clever solution, and you know, I couldn't agree more that climate change is enormously compelling, and in our own little way we can start thinking about medical waste as a way to get at it.
Yeah, thank you. So a last question here. I reckon most leaps or giant leaps in medical device come from venture capitals and startups, and not from the giants. They are just happy to improve 10%. Is that correct, or am I way off?
No, look, I think there are shades of gray. I think laparoscopic tools is a good example where that was really driven by 2 of the big guys, but in conjunction with physicians who said, now that we've got a tool that can help us take out a gallbladder, you know, we need a basket to extract it or whatever. But I think it's fair to say that most of the rewards in big companies are indeed based on sales and marketing and ultimately profit for the big guy and earnings per share. So it's the early stage guys like Jesse Becker who said, you know what, we're going to try to solve postpartum hemorrhage, and then a company like Merck takes all of the de-risking and all of the work and all of the sleepless nights that got us to that point and says, okay, we're now going to own it, and we're going to make sure that it's delivered to 5,000 hospitals around the country. And that synergy is actually, you know, makes total sense, because no way a little startup can sell in 5,000 hospitals. So each has something to give, but in general, the rewards are different in early stage than they are in late stage. And, you know, if you play the sweet spot, it'll work out okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this, Tom. And we are going to see more of you later, a bit later, in the panel. Thank you, Dr. Krummel.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We are going to move to Gothenburg Research School of Health Engineering. And that is a way of trying to foster the collaboration in a bit younger age than, well, I don't know, younger is all relative, but for grad students to work together and to actually be joint or early on in their careers. So Justin Schneiderman, who gave a talk before about the image analysis, and Malin Barman, please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Just a moment while I get my screen sharing set up properly. Okay. So as mentioned, my name is Justin Schneiderman. For those of you that were around this morning, I gave a talk about the lab in Boik, and this is going to be a completely different topic. So to follow along with what Tom was talking about, having research schools that involve health and engineering, here in the region, there has been a new research PhD program started to do just that. So what exactly is it? The Gothenburg Research School of Health Engineering aims to educate future researchers and medical doctors in the frontier between health, healthcare, and technology. And this is a joint effort between Gothenburg University, specifically the Sahlgrenska Academy, which is a medical school here at the GU, as well as VGR and the Sahlgrenska University Hospital and the Chalmers University of Technology. We have a steering board that consists of representatives from each of the partners. So there's Martin Lagging, Johan Bergström from Sahlgrenska Academy, Jenny Almqvist from the region, as well as Anders Hiltander and Cecilia Handberg from Sahlgrenska University Hospital. And at Chalmers, we have Richard Landberg, Michael Persson, and Anne-Sophie Kahns. And then we have the co-project coordinators, which are myself, Justin Schneiderman, and Malin Barman, who you will hear more from in a moment. So the aim here is to provide an add-on to conventional studies at each of the universities, that is to say Chalmers University and Sahlgrenska Academy. So PhD students at each of those programs already will be continuing their conventional studies, that is to say Sahlgrenska Academy students will continue with their medical PhD, and the Chalmers students will continue with their engineering PhD. But on top of that, for example, the Chalmers engineers will learn about challenges in healthcare and medicine, understand the healthcare environment, and then also learn about how to drive innovation within the healthcare system. On the other side, the medical students at Sahlgrenska Academy will learn more about technical solutions, those that are really coming to the forefront of the research frontier in health and medicine. They will also understand better about what technical research, the environment itself, and how technical research is performed. And they'll be learning more about how technical challenges can be used to meet healthcare needs. So we have several angles with which we want to help improve education across these disciplines, and Malin Barman will provide some more details about that.
Yes, thank you, Justin. So what we see here is some of the examples of what the students get beyond their normal PhD studies. So, for example, the research school functions as a platform for networking between the two universities and the hospital. We also have developed specialist courses, and they are developed after the students' need, and this is an ongoing process. We have support, what we call from both sides. So the PhD students involved in the research school get support. They have a supervisor from both the medical side and the engineering side. They also get the opportunity to learn from each other, and they network a lot about the projects. And the projects that we have in the research school so far is, for example, in medical image analysis, artificial intelligence, pre-hospital care, decision support tools, etc. And if we go to the next slide. So one of the activities that we have in the research school is a course that we run right now. And this is in the form of a seminar series. And this course includes topics like innovation, utilization and implementation, ethics, dissemination, future challenges in healthcare, AI in healthcare, health economics, disease prevention, etc. And all topics have a clear coupling to the PhD student specific projects within medicine, health and technology. And this course runs over 1 year, and it includes 10 seminars. And we have the seminars in 3-hour sessions. So all sessions starts with a seminar that is free and open to everyone, not only PhD students. So the seminars are open to everyone at Chalmers, Gothenburg University, Sahlgrenska Academy and Sahlgrenska University Hospital. And in the course, the students are also having group discussions regarding the topics after the seminar. Next, please. Yeah, so the next seminar in the course that is open to all of you is a seminar by Torbjörn Lund. Torbjörn Lund is professor in biomathematics at the mathematical science at Chalmers and also at the University of Gothenburg. And Torbjörn will talk about challenges and breakthroughs in initiating collaborations between medicine, mathematics, and engineering. And this seminar is at the 21st of April at 9 to 10. Yes. And in May, the 19th of May, at the same time, we have the great pleasure to have Anna Norberg from Department of Law at Lund University. And Anna is a former lawyer with great knowledge in legal and ethical aspects of medical research. And this seminar will discuss topics such as who owns the data, what is data protection, what is personal data, what is the major legal obligations regarding data, and do patients have rights regarding their data, Is it enough to only follow the law? And what type of ethical and social aspects should be taken into consideration? Yes. And our last seminar before the summer is on 10th of June. And then we have 2 speakers that will give an interactive seminar regarding the topic artificial intelligence in healthcare. Will the value match the hype, or are we expecting another AI winter? And the speakers are Sam Polesi, medical doctor and PhD at Department of Dermatology and Venerology at GU and VGR, and Rolf Heckeman, professor at the Department of Radiation Physics at GU and also at MedTech West. And Rolf and Sam will give a brief background to the research projects and discuss implementation hurdles that they have identified along their path. Yes. And if you go to the area of advanced health engineering homepage in the calendar, you will find our upcoming seminars there when you can also add your interest. What is unique with this research school? Well, a lot of things I would like to say, but foremost, this is a joint regional platform for graduate education. So it's a network in the Gothenburg area. And students trained in the graduate school will have broad and concrete know-how in an area beyond their main one. So these are our main goals with the research school. Yes. And if you are interested to know more about the research school or to get in contact with us, please send us an email or call. And you also have information about the research school on this health engineering homepage. Thank you.
Thank you, Malin, Justin. It looks so professional and great, so I'm really nervous now for the next week presentation for myself. So we are a little bit behind the schedule, but I'll see if there is a question. To me, everything was very polished and clear, even the time I was going to talk next week, so thanks for that. And good luck with all this collaboration, fostering collaboration by actually couple the pairs together. So I thought that the color picture in the beginning with this yellow field of they will learn from each other, I think that is probably the most important part in my book, at least. Well, it's hard to compare, I know that, but especially when you're inside it. So I thought when we are going to make this transition now between these kind of presentations, and there's still no other external question, thank you again. We're going to transit to the panel, but during that transition, I invite Cecilia back on the stage here because I think we need some more exercise. There's still another hour to go here. Thank you, Malin and Justin.
Well, I'm glad you appreciated that, Torbjörn, so I'll have to invent some stretches for you on the spot. We can actually continue from where we left off last time. If you remember, we were pushing backward like this behind our backs, trying to keep our elbows straight. And if you point your thumbs and your fingers down toward the floor, you get a nice stretch in the biceps, probably, I think, is where I feel it. And from here, you can clasp your hands and try to do basically the reverse of what we did before, but behind your back. And if you're noticing here that your shoulders are pitching forward, you can try rolling them down and rolling them back a little bit, kind of chewing on those muscles again. Also, don't overdo the force here. It's okay if you're kind of loosely coupled, but just kind of chewing on your shoulder area there. And from here, we're going to try and make a V shape with our arms, like grasping your deltoids, I believe they're called, with your fingers, and maybe pitch forward a little bit and try twisting your back. You can probably feel this a bit better if you're sitting down, honestly, but this will loosen you up a little bit. And depending on how far you can reach, you might have some space here, you might not, but the point is to try and pull your shoulder blades apart this time. Okay. And from here, we can just shake loose a little bit. And something I recommend for those of you who do a lot of writing is to actually just make a loose ball with your fist like this and give yourself a little massage here in the underarms. This is so nice, honestly. I don't understand why more people don't do this. This is really underrated. So those are my tips for just loosening up and getting a little more blood flowing. And now I hope you're ready for the panel. So thank you for letting me take over again, Torbjörn.
Thank you for this improvised question I gave you. Now we're ready to move on, and I'm so happy to have this exciting panel in front of me here. And I mean, for example, we have Elin Esbjörner Winters. She's an associate professor at Chalmers, and she's working with protein folding, protein aggregation when that happens in a bad way. So we have neurodegeneration that can cause disorders, as such as we heard Sara Riggare talked about before. But she has also another arm in her work. She's working with Formula X, that research center, where they do function DNA delivery, delivering medicine to the using the RNA here, using this kind of vesicles. Speaking of Formula X, when Elin was together with Fredrik Höök writing the proposal, that was about the same time as we had the first Engineering Health conference. She worked together also on that application with Anna Sandström, Director Science, Policy and Relations at AstraZeneca. So they together wrote this successful application, and Anna has a background from physics when it comes to this true inner background, but physically also from Sandviken, I understand, and Umeå, via Uppsala, KI, SciLife Lab, and Vinnova. Speaking about SciLife Lab and Vinnova, we have also Lars Hammarström, who is the head of Division of Health and in Vinnova, and we know that Lars Hammarström has a background from Tampa, Florida, via Louisiana State University, and further on to postdoc, biomedical postdoc, and then industrial postdoc in Palo Alto. And speaking of Palo Alto, we have Tom Crummell, professor at Stanford, coming back to join us on this panel. Speaking of real doctors, finally, we have Mikael Elam, who is joining us from the hospital, where he just had an examination that is connecting to one of the first talks this morning here. Maybe he will tell us more about that moving forward here. But I thought, since we are running a bit late, we should just go straight ahead to answering the question, how to foster collaboration in health engineering. Do you have a general piece of advice? Could you give a successful example that you have been seen in your work? Or could you give also maybe a not so successful example, being polite and anonymize in a proper manner? That would be really interesting. So maybe I start with you, Mikael. Since I kind of open up that you are in a special place and have done something that is related to what we saw in the morning.
So what's the question?
Oh, the question was, so how do we foster collaboration in health engineering? Can you have a general advice, or can you give an example where that really worked? But first of all, I would like you to say something about what you have done just right now here, since that couples together what we heard with Max Cortis talk here in the morning.
I think many of the speakers today have illustrated something, which is that collaboration for many people sort of evolves by itself, by creative people from both the med side and the tech side. And Max and Paolo are fantastic examples of researchers and clinicians who foster collaboration by themselves. They don't need facilitating structures. They benefit from facilitating structures, but they really, collaboration grows around groups like that. And I think Paolo mentioned they were 18 surgeons involved in in the operation of the double hand transplant patient he mentioned this morning. And I think if you look at all the other clinical practitioners and also the biomedical scientists and the techno scientists, you can triple or quadruple that amount of people being involved. It's a huge group of people around this single patient. So it's a very good illustration of how collaboration is sort of self-generating and expanding around groups like that. Still, having said that, all these groups, of course, you can multiply that by giving support in the various different stages of collaborative work, but the form of that, of course, depends on what stage of development you're in. I mean, in the collaboration between organizations like Anna's organization, they have their particular way of approaching medical faculties, for instance, and also technology faculties, which differ very much from small medtech companies in the early stages of development and commercialization of productification. And even more different are the needs and the challenges of academic groups approaching each other, because there's a lot of this both push and pull that Tom was talking about, basically. So we have very many different needs.
Thank you, Mikael. So this is a complicated question, as we saw here, and you mentioned Anna has she comes from a different world. Or she is in a different, she comes from the same world, but she is now in a different place, maybe. Do you want to add something there to these general questions?
Yeah, well, I can add from the perspective of, and also building on what both Tom was talking about, but also Mikael. Of course, we very much know that innovation very seldom happens in this isolation. That's what we heard throughout the day. And however innovative our science is to achieve all we want to achieve with, accelerating the delivery of life-changing medicines, we cannot do it alone. So we need co-creation. It's been a popular word today. And as a company, we need to be very good at collaborating. And we have over 1,400 active R&D collaborations across the globe. And when we set up a new collaboration, we start with the research question at hand. And that's also, as Tom was saying, being solution agnostic more and more so. In our case, it's often being modality agnostic and starting by identifying the mechanisms behind disease and then moving along to try to find a suitable intervention. It needs to build on being mutually beneficial and building on mutual respect between the players, the stakeholders. So understanding each other's drivers and roles. And often when we collaborate with the small innovative startups, we collaborate across the value chain as well, so that we don't have competing interests, we have mutual interests in identifying new solutions. And those solutions can be part of accelerating again the delivery of new medicines. So I think we need to understand each other when setting up the collaboration. We need to take the time to do it. And I think a really good example is the Formula X collaboration, which was a pleasure to be part of delivering or starting up, initiating, I should say. I was only part of the initiation phase, which is my role to catalyze new collaborations. And working together with Elin and Fredrik and Marcus and others, trying to set this up, and also looking for who are the innovative startups that can contribute to this research question that we are trying to address. That is functional delivery of mRNA into cells, achieving endosomal escape. How do we do that? and trying to identify the key stakeholders that can contribute to solving that problem. So yeah, that's one of the good examples. I think when it comes to failures, I would stick to when we don't understand each other's drivers, or we are seen as a bag of money and not seen as someone who actually has something to contribute to the collaboration. We have 600 PhDs in Gothenburg at our site, at our R&D site, 30 of them are professors. So we are like a small university there. So that sometimes there's been some friction in collaborations where we are also seen as being a bit arrogant in expecting milestones, etc., to be met, because we haven't had the proper dialogue beforehand and understanding each other's drivers. So that's very important, to give it some time to build the trust you need to promote these type of collaborations.
Thank you. That was really nice to hear, and especially talking about the failures. We heard then in Dr. Chalmers' talk that we shouldn't be afraid of fail. That's important, but it's good also to talk about it so we don't repeat the same thing. Since I was also going to ask you to give the elevator pitch about the Formula X, but you did that at the end, more or less. So I think I should leave the word to Elin if you want to complete that elevator, the trip number 2, if you want to add it. But I mean, I think we got the picture what it's all about. But
yes, I mean, so the Formula X center is an SSF-funded center where we got 75 million Swedish kronor to try to solve mRNA delivery, and as you know, that's a very central topic right now, because the mRNA COVID vaccines, they actually do deliver mRNA, but the problem is not solved just because we can deliver vaccines. That's super cool, and it's very, very important. But we also want to aim for other types of mRNA therapies, and therefore we've established this interdisciplinary consortium where AstraZeneca is a main industrial partner. And I agree with Anna that we had a very fun process actually when we wrote the application. It's not always that you think of writing a proposal as a lot of fun, but it really was, because we had a lot of good scientific discussion, and we found really good common ground. And I think the reason why we did that and why it works so well between industry and academia in this case is because we really have fundamental questions that we both want to answer. And we also have very complementary expertise. So none of us could do this collaboration on our own. We really need each other, and that has just been more and more manifested as we've started the project. So I think that is a really good example of a good interdisciplinary collaboration that involves both industry and academia. And then I have to agree with Anna that in my experience, when collaboration with industry does not work is when you don't understand each other. And I think that can be quite common, that you have different angles to a problem, to what extent you need to just solve a problem, and to what extent you need to understand the problem to solve the problem. And before you understand the motivations of the ones you collaborate with, it can be difficult to establish good collaboration. And I have experience of that, but then when you overcome it and you understand the other's standpoint, then it becomes easier and can become much more productive.
Yeah, thank you. So focus on communication and avoid miscommunication. That's what we hear here. And Anna, you mentioned working together with startups in a win-win way, and talking about the Vinnova. That's what you are working with, startups that work together in a win-win situation with industry. Lars, would you like to add something to that, and maybe to come up with a recipe for fostering good collaboration for health engineering or healthcare?
Well, thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to join here today. And I think I agree with all of the previous speakers that the whole concept of health development now is becoming so diverse in its in terms of the domain that it involves. I mean, we're no longer just talking about companies collaborating on basis of a common understanding of biology or on a molecular basis or a knowledge of disease. Collaboration is extending much more into ICT, into robotics, into med tech, and also beyond into sectors, you know, societal sectors when it comes to you know, analyzing the food that we eat and our everyday behaviors in terms of exercise and how those things affect our health. So really moving beyond the medical application towards looking at health in a holistic manner. And this of course involves them involving a lot of different stakeholders with a very heterogeneous background and a very heterogeneous expertise. And I can only underscore the importance for those collaborations in really taking the time at the beginning of a collaboration to formulate not just a common vision of what you want to achieve, but also understanding what that vision means for all of the individual collaborators in that, so that you can adjust and pivot your role in that collaboration to make sure that you know, everybody meets what their expectations are out of it, and having that, you know, pinpointed from the start. And one of we have an ongoing call now, since we are a funding agency for this type of collaboration, where we're looking at innovation arenas for precision health, where we're inviting a very broad scope of actors to really tackle some of the big health issues that we have in our society today. And we're providing long-term funding for this. And one of the aspects that we're lifting very specifically in that call is that we want to see an active leadership in terms of the development of this common vision and this common dynamic, so that is very well formulated in the applications that we get. And this, I think, provides a great incentive and also the best prerequisites for those projects to really be able to last in the long term. Because as soon as if you start off a collaboration and all of the individual parties are not really in tune with each other's ambitions, there's a greater risk of those collaborations kind of dwindling down or not being successful over time. So I can only agree with the previous speakers.
Thanks. So it's a very common theme here. So I'm curious to see what Dr. Cromwell is saying about what he's heard about his fellow panelists, their statements here.
Yeah. So thanks for the chance to chime in, and I'll I think it comes down to a couple of comments that Anna made, and that is to understand each other's cultures and drivers. And there's no question that, you know, engineers look at the world differently than physicians. They look at the world differently than business people. But the intentional study and understanding of each other, frequently we tend to think of it in four different ways. One, I think that leaders can and must model the process, because if you know, what people see is more important than what they're told. And so if they see warm and gracious collaboration and acknowledgement of differing points of view at the top, that begins to model the expected behavior. Two, we think that co-location of people from different backgrounds is essential, and whether that's coffee, food, a gym, maybe an occasional pub crawl, all of those things are wonderful ways to humanize what is occasionally demonized as someone that isn't in your tribe. And we think that creating that goodwill on the front end, so we are very social and intentional and it's not Machiavellian, but again, it's much better to have shared a cup of coffee and come to know someone as a human being. The third thing that we do is we're quite intentionally proscriptive about bringing people together. We talk about differing ways to, the surgeon wants to start a meeting in the morning at 6 a.m. The engineer is just going to bed. And it's really critical to understand those differing things in a very prescribed way. And then finally, we create reward systems. So for example, grants and awards frequently require people with appointments in different schools in the university so that you can use rewards and grant dollars to kind of herd people in that direction. And again, our belief is that honey is more effective. So those four things I think are the way we think about it. And again, it gets to that a comment that Anna I think made that's really insightful, is that you need to understand each other's culture, drivers, what makes each other tick. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dr. Krummel. So we heard that you're advocating that the leaders should take the front seat of showing generosity and sharing to set a good example. That is a way to foster this, and we seem to all agree. I do myself as well. The communication is the central thing here. But how do we foster that, except for what you said, setting out the more cozy environment? Do we have any other tricks up our sleeves to set up for a good communication and also to have this kind of common, or maybe not common, but at least enlightened viewpoint of different goals in the whole collaboration? Do you have any other standard? Lars, please.
I can just add to that. I think that one of the things that I think that we could do better in Sweden, I think Chalmers is an excellent example of where this is done well, is increasing the incentives for mobility between sectors. I mean, really making sure that it is meriting to move between the academic sector and the industrial sector, or meriting to move between the clinical sector and the industrial sector, because what that fosters is also a sense of humility. That, oh my God, these other people actually know what they're doing also. And I think the most dangerous thing to a collaboration is somebody who walks in the room and says, I know what's best right now. Hopefully those are the people that you choose to surround yourself with. So I think that really promoting and incentivizing mobility between sectors is an area that I think helps to foster this kind of inclusive environment or inclusive culture and a dialogue that is respectful between parties.
Yeah, great. I just had an experience similar to that when I was a postdoc in Stony Brook, Long Island. I started to be more and more interested in biology, and came from this pure math background, and took a detour and went to a course in developmental theory, and was invited to the Xenopus frog lab afterwards. And I didn't have an intention to do any good work at all, but just to get into the culture. And it was really what do you say? That was I really got impressed by all the experimentalists after that. I can see that the hard part. It's so easy for us theorists just to think about an experiment without actually seeing all the problems. I mean, for the freezers to get too cold, so the tadpoles were frozen. That's not good. Any other comments about that? So we are, reward system. Maybe I can follow up on that, Dr. Krummel. The reward system that actually, adding money to groups that try to cross the boundaries is something like that, or to be more concrete about this.
Yes, so we have a series of challenge grants that typically run on either a quarterly or a 3-time a year. We're very public about it in terms of the application process, where we require that the 2 PIs come from different schools in the university. We then celebrate the successes. We emphasize the value of the team of people from different backgrounds. And again, I think, people tend to respond to how leaders present. And if that's the environment and that's the expectation, you can change behavior. We also and it's worth commenting, we also recognize that is a setup for conflict. I use the example where the surgeon wants to start a meeting at 6 a.m. and the engineer is just going to bed. So we actually have a licensed clinical psychologist to work with teams to explicitly have the conversation around, circadian rhythms and those are realities, and it's a little Pollyanna-ish to think that there won't be conflict. But I think, again, coming back to Anna's notion about understanding, and you don't have to change your rhythm, but you do need to understand that if you want a good functioning meeting, maybe coffee at 11 is the perfect time to take those things into account and to bring people together at that point in time. And it's about coping strategies. The reality is, whether you're in university or industry, we all work with people from different backgrounds and different, as we say, tribes. And the successful people are the ones that are able to make that work. I'll always remember I was fortunate that was the kind of behavior and modeling that I saw as a trainee, and that sticks with you. And I think the dividends are paid in the subsequent years and decades. And again, sometimes we don't appreciate that our trainees are watching what we do, and so it is worthwhile remembering that.
No, thank you. And I know that Vinnova is having special setup calls for that kind of collaboration with similar rules.
Even design of spaces, right? So if you put people in separate corners, that sends, the way you arrange a furniture, that sends a very different way of structuring space and work than if you have people facing inwards. And so simple things like that can be quite powerful. And we use the example of at Facebook or at Apple or at Google. That is very much the way spaces are designed. And because I have an opportunity to interact in those environments, we try to bring those lessons from those real world experiences back into the university.
Yeah. This small stuff can be really important, or small, I mean, interior design.
But it's very symbolic.
Yeah. So I'm curious, Anna, that because we're talking about, we have this background that collaboration over boundaries is really good. That's something we should strive for. But in industry, you are a bit smarter than that. I mean, there is a collaboration for something real. It has to come out in the end as a new drug, right? So have you found the secret kind of balance between how you should mix this special sauce of differences to be as efficient as possible for the end product?
Well, of course, we need to be prioritizing what we do, even though we have an R&D budget of $6.1 billion US. Even so, we need to prioritize, and we don't jump on every new breakthrough science innovation. We take up some parts, but we sort of keep an ear to the ground in our other areas. So we are cherry picking a bit and maybe jump on board later. But I wanted also to reinforce what Lars was saying about the mobility. I mean, being a physicist who went to do my PhD at the medical faculty at Karolinska, and then I went to government agency, and then I went to industry. I mean, mobility between organizations is really important, and that's really helping me in the role I have now, catalyzing new collaborations, understanding what makes the stakeholders tick, so to say, what are the drivers. But at the same time, I want also then to reinforce that it takes time to build the trust to establish new collaborations. And so it is imperative that we have the type of threshold, the type of grants that lowers the threshold for establishing such collaborations. So I think the type of programs that SSF had with the Formula X and that Vinnova has now for innovation environments, that's the type of grants that really helps pave the way for these fruitful collaborations. And now we are actually in the process right now to build on what we learned from Formula X, to build oligonova and oligonucleotides in the Gothenburg region and across as a national network to academia, to clinicians, to innovators in SMEs, to sort of build a national platform for delivering oligonucleotide therapies. And we are extremely grateful for also the initiative that the Wallenberg Foundation is doing on data-driven life science. It's 3.1 billion Swedish crowns being put into data-driven life science. And that will be across Sweden. And I think that will make a huge difference when it comes to mining the data we are generating in life sciences, both the clinical and the preclinical. So these type of initiatives are really important to pave the way for the fruitful collaborations that will lead to innovations, and then in turn, future export revenues for Sweden.
Thank you, Anna. That's good to hear the insights from the industry. And I'm happy also to hear that you mentioned the data-driven life science that just got started. Mikael, you had something here.
I was just reflecting a bit. All of us are talking about trust, right? And we're talking about it being time-consuming to build trust. And the greater the community, the longer it takes. I'm sitting, I think we have the same development all over the world, but in Gothenburg right now, we have a group sitting at the Gothenburg University looking with people from humanities and societal research areas. And Anna mentioned Wallenberg sphere. There are specific calls for WASP, HS, humanities and societal aspects of AI. And we have lots of people from the learning area of academia, from primary school and upwards. We have judicial issues, not only about who owns what, but about accountability in decision support systems, not in the least in the medical sphere, and especially in real time, in surgery, for instance. So we have heaps of very, very different academic areas moving in on the same turf. So it sounds to me as if we're going to spend more and more time building trust before we can start work and get this thing together. And I think with the size of the Silicon Valley, Tom, what are your views on that, and how do you deal with this issue? Because you've had it for some time.
Yeah, I really love the way we've gotten to the word trust. There's a book called The Speed of Trust, written by Stephen Covey, and it makes the point that if everyone is lawyered up and can't have a friendly conversation with anybody about anything, then nothing ever happens. Trust can be implicit. It may. I think you're right that it's either innocent till proven guilty. Or alternate, and that's a way of thinking and maybe a way of viewing the world. Alternately, then all of the things we've talked about to try to build that so that you come to understand the other tribes, if you will, in a way that says they're different, but they're valuable and useful. And in the end, that's one of the things that Tom Fogarty emphasizes, that he says surgeons don't listen. And it I think is the classic that I think Lars mentioned, where someone comes in and says, I'm going to tell you how we're going to do this. And again, I'll come back to, I think that really does model from the top. And then dealing with the inevitable conflict is also, I think, a structural thing that you can be explicit and say, look, we get that. And in fact, when our teams assemble, we tell them, we expect that there will be differences of opinion / clashes, and A, work it out, or B, let's talk it out with one of the more senior people. And I think somebody said, it does take time, and the answer is yes, it does. No way around that. But it's essential.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Carmel. Lars, you have some experience from the Valley as well as a postdoc there for 1.5 years. It wasn't Genentech, but it was close by, right? It was Roche or?
Yeah, it was at Roche.
Yeah. Do you recognize the? Or do you want to go back after watching Tom's presentation and seeing his background?
I miss the weather, if nothing else. It's always nice to the sense of inferiority complex increases exponentially always when you have somebody from Stanford talking about the ecosystem around Stanford. But I think that we have a lot of tools in Sweden that can really be. I think we can learn an enormous amount from the Bay Area about how they do things. But I think that we also have our uniqueness in Sweden in our ecosystem with the teachers exemption, and we have our own regulations. We need to build an innovation system that works in our context from that. But I wanted actually to, if I can pivot the conversation a little bit, because I had a question relating a little bit to successful collaboration, a little bit addressed to Tom also, is one of the things that we've noticed, especially perhaps when it comes to digital health or medtech applications, that one of the challenges once a successful collaboration gets on board is not just identification of an innovative solution to a defined need, but building into the collaboration also the capacity for implementation and scalability in healthcare, and to really have that on board at an early stage in terms of a collaboration. I'd be interested to hear from you, Tom. I'm taking your job right now, Torbjörn,
thank you.
moderator, but it'd be interesting to hear from your reflection on how you work with these questions in your center and in building this aspect from the start so that it doesn't become just a tomtebloss, as we say, Sweden, a kind of one-off short pitch approach that just eventually dies by itself.
Yeah. So I think you raise a really important observation. Look, Silicon Valley is unique, but as I like to say, no one's got a lock on talent, and there isn't one way, one light, one truth. With our 18 other biodesign programs, which are literally around the world, our standard message is it needs to work in your environment, and to force fit this is the way we do it, which runs counterculture for whatever reason, is just stupid. And I would say that Stanford Biodesign is medicine heavy and engineering light, and business non-existent. If I were to, give you the short critique on what I think we do better and what I think we don't, and we make up for it in other ways. Our business school is not very involved, but we're surrounded by successful businesses, so that's how we have adapted to our environment and our standard. I don't know if in Sweden you've ever seen the movie Cool Running, which is about the Jamaican bobsled team, and in the early going they're trying to be like the Swiss, and what they discover is no, they shouldn't be like the Swiss. They need to be Jamaican, and so I think you need to be functional in your environment. And not try to be rigidly like somebody else. I've now recently moved to Austin, Texas, and it's really interesting because everyone says, oh, Silicon Valley, and my view is the environment in Austin is different, but unique, a tremendous amount of talent, a university of 60,000 undergrads. That's a very different environment than at Stanford, where there are 8,000 undergrads and tons of talent. And I continue to sing that song as a small town kid from Wisconsin that has no idea how he wound up in Silicon Valley, is that the world's a big place, and really nobody's got the singular answer.
Thank you. And I'm also grateful for both Mikael and Lars for taking over my job. And I can also tell the people that are watching this that you can send in questions, and I will get that here on my laptop. That was invented much earlier than I thought, Tom, according to your presentation.
Isn't that stunning to look at that?
I know. 72.
But that is absolutely lifted from the paper, and it just says something about a missed opportunity at who's ever heard of Xerox as a computer company, but they started it all.
So I thought also changing a bit here and talking about collaboration, but more introspectively, and aiming at looking at Elin here, because you're a golden example of interdisciplinary collaboration within yourself, because you have more than one string on your harp. And I'm interested to see if you have had your internal discussions and what are the pros and cons of doing different things by yourself as a researcher.
So for the audience, I started off as a physical chemist, and nowadays I'm most of the time a biochemist and cell biologist, and sometimes I sort of switch in between. And I would say I've never thought so much about the pros and cons. It's for me, I have done this because I find it interesting to. And that I find that I have research problems that require knowledge in many disciplines, and that it can be an advantage to be able to bridge them partly yourself. But then at some stage you also get to the point where you need collaborators to really do something that is advanced. But I could also tell that when I did my postdoc, I ended up collaborating with a huge Wellcome Trust-funded consortium on Alzheimer's disease in the UK, and there I realized this advantage of being interdisciplinary, because I could understand both the medics and the physicists on this consortium, because I could speak both languages, and I found in my career that it also gives a lot of opportunities for collaborations at both ends, which I find fun, and that's an important driver for me to do something in research that I think is fun, and where I address a problem that I think is important. So that's why I've ended up doing interdisciplinary research, and also engage in a lot of interdisciplinary collaboration. Thank you.
It's nice to hear these insights. We actually got a question from outside here now. I just saw directed to any of you that wants to answer. Could you please mention any tangible steps researcher can take on short order to initiate and strengthen collaborations? I guess that depends.
Maybe I can continue there. Also, if we talk about it in a local perspective, that I think Chalmers has made quite many good possibilities to do that, but by providing seed funding on different types of small projects. And it's a bit similar to what Tom mentioned, that by providing maybe not so much funding, but a little bit of funding to actually start collaborating with someone that you didn't work with before and that has a different background than you have. Yeah. You can try a collaboration, and that's also a very important way to build your network.
That's good. Do you have something similar within AstraZeneca, or is there? Do you need to lower any thresholds within the company like that?
People are doing. I mean, we have secondments. We also have an internal postdoc program. We have we take in a lot of trainees, etc., in our graduate program as well. So we try to get people to move around a bit, so that functions also evolve and learn from each other. So yes, I guess we could do more to spur collaboration, but I think that it's also, we realize that we need all the different types of backgrounds for each project. So we are putting together cross-functional teams for every issue we try to address.
Yeah.
So that's a way of working within the company, I would say. And it's very rewarding. I mean, it's so energizing to work with people with a different background than yourself. And I mean, just the people at AstraZeneca in Gothenburg at their R&D site there, they come also from 50 countries. That's also an important thing to remember. It's a truly multicultural site as well. And that's also something that gives energy to collaborations.
When I look at the question here again, it sounds like the question stater here, maybe he wants to say, what can a single researcher do? And I guess it's going to these kind of events and looking at what other people are doing and reach out, I guess, just to make a call to someone and maybe also.
I think also if I can comment just quickly again that it sometimes when we talk about fostering collaboration, it sounds like collaboration is the most important thing, but the most important is that we address a joint problem. So for the single researcher, it might also be to identify what are these research problems where I need help, and at the same time can contribute to the person who will help. Because that's where you find good collaboration, where you both need each other, or several in the team needs each other.
So that brings us to a final question. I thought, Mika, maybe you can start answering that. There are, as a single researcher, you can go to very many different organizations to get support, especially since the teacher exemptions in Sweden makes it a bit more complicated. And I remember there is the famous, or maybe infamous, article in Sydsvenska Dagbladet from 2013 when they started to count the number of organizations that supported innovators in the universities and around, and they stopped at 120 just in that part of corner of Sweden. So how can a single researcher / inventor orientate themselves in that kind of ecology? And we will talk more about that tomorrow as well, if you don't have a quick answer now.
I rarely have quick answers, and that was Skåne, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Skåne.
120. Yeah. They beat us on that scale, I have to say. But the discussion is there in all the regions of Sweden that, of course, we also have quite a complicated innovation supportive structure in Western Sweden. And I think it stems from the fact we started out with, that the conditions are so different between academic groups collaborating versus small tech firms versus big pharma industry and such, that there are so many both regulatory and sort of logistics of the research process itself, differences between different groups, that you will generate many different types of support functions. But coming back to what Tom said, I think here, if you let people themselves organize different support groups, we're going to have hundreds. So here you need to have a clear sign from the leaders of faculties, of the university hospital, in my case also, and from the surrounding supporting region, that this is the way we do it. There has been a discussion in the medical faculty of wanting one door in to anyone wanting to approach the medical system, academic or practice, should just come to one door. Let's call it one gateway. That's a nice vision, but I think you have to appreciate that if you have such a gateway, you need someone behind that gate, leading people to at least a choice between 15 or 20 different doors, depending on what type of need you have and what type of obstacles you're facing. And having said that, I think there are, this is more of the innovation panel discussion tomorrow, I guess, but there are quite a number of support systems, also grant support systems for early funding of ideas. I mean, the Western Sweden region has created an innovation platform which does exactly that, which is focused on people working in healthcare having their own ideas of simplifying. That's really need pull, Tom, and teaming them up with technology people, signal analysis people in companies or in academia. And Lars is sitting there. I mean, Vinnova has a number of systems. I'm thinking of MedTech for Health, for instance, where you actually have specific calls just for placing tech people inside healthcare environments, or vice versa, pulling out clinical people, biomedical researchers, and placing them in companies. So I think there are a lot of such functions about. You just have to find them. And that's what a common infrastructure within the region could help with, helping individual researchers to navigate in this system.
Thank you very much. That was the last word, unfortunately, because we are being kicked out now by the real hosts here.
I think it was a wonderful discussion. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank you, Mikael and Lars, for taking a little bit of Torbjörn's job also. I think that was great. I think we had a wonderful first day.
Definitely.
It was a long day. It's a little bit beyond 5 o'clock now, so we shouldn't spend too much time, but I really enjoyed all the presentations and all the discussions that we've seen.
Yeah, and I want to say a special thank you to those who called in inconveniently. You're extra welcome, and your contribution has been much appreciated. So we will continue tomorrow, and I think actually, Martin, we can revisit the main points from today at the beginning of tomorrow,
we'll do
so
that.
We don't have to bore people. But I really want to thank everyone who has participated and enriched this day. My mother has actually been listening, and she's an old clinical mammographer, so she says you've all been great.
And mine too. She has also been listening.
Keep it in the family. If I may, I'd like to round off by quoting a Swedish children's song that says, "Det tyckte de var så intressant så de gick och hämtade en annan elefant." Basically, if something's interesting, invite other people in and you might eventually foster the next Max Ortiz Catalan or similar. So we'll see you tomorrow in the morning at 9 o'clock sharp. Thank you very much for
now. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.